So I want to take a few minutes here to discuss the whole Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton, who or who isn't a quote progressive debate that's going on. So I want to get a couple baseline things out of the way. So for starters, most of you know I'm supporting Bernie Sanders in the primary. But the truth is I have friends who are supporting Hillary Clinton, and I think that we can and should be able to talk about both candidates without being horrible to each other, right? We should be able to talk about the differences without being dicks. But also talking about candidates and the differences are what primaries are for. It's healthy. It's good for both candidates. So I want to ask a kind of the big question here. So now, I don't believe that any one person or even a small group of people should be able to define what being a progressive is. I certainly don't want to define for everyone what a progressive is. I don't think I can or should. Also, no politician can or should either, right? I don't think that's what Sanders did here, but I'll get to that in a minute. So, while no one person should be able to define that, I guess my question is, shouldn't we, as the greater progressive movement, be able to define what being a progressive is? I mean, shouldn't we be able to define that as a whole? I mean, I think that we should. I don't think it's controversial to say that not all Democrats are progressives. That's not a controversial statement, right? I am someone, first and foremost, who identifies politically as a progressive. I don't actually identify as a Democrat, mostly because there are too many things that too many Democratic politicians do that are, in my opinion, not progressive. So I identify as a progressive, not as a Democrat. And look, if all it takes to be a quote progressive is to be a Democrat, to have a D next to your name, then we need to come up with a new word for progressive and a new name for the progressive movement, right? And look, it's not like I'm calling for some type of like purity test here. There's definitely a positive side to having the progressive movement be a sort of big umbrella, right? Where people who are fighting for various causes, be it income inequality, climate change, women's health, racism, LGBTQ rights, money in politics, etc., 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 can all come together in some form of solidarity. In fact, we all know intersectionality is really, really important, and it's sadly lacking in a lot of corners of the progressive movement, but the fact is there are centrist Democrats, right? There are right-wing Democrats, correct? And as it stands, progressives are only one part of the greater Democratic Party. Again, I don't believe that that's a controversial statement, right? Look, in the House of Representatives, there is a progressive caucus. It's a bunch of Democrats who identify as progressive and caucus as progressives. Then there's also a bunch of Democrats in the House who don't. There's a bunch of the House that aren't in the progressive caucus. There's also some Republicans out there who are pro-choice. We wouldn't call that person a progressive, would we? There's some Republicans who believe in science and climate change. That's great, but we wouldn't identify that person as a progressive, right? I think that what I'm trying to say here is I think that we, as a movement, can and should stand for certain values. We can and should be able to define what being a progressive means. And when a politician, especially one that's supposedly supposed to be on our side, goes against those progressive values, I think we should call them out on it. And look, again, I also think that it should be an ongoing conversation, right? And again, I do not get to define this. I don't. Not one person is. But I think we as a movement should define it. Which gets me to the whole Hillary Clinton as a progressive argument that's going on. So let's get another couple baseline things out of the way here. As a Bernie Sanders supporter, I do not think people who believe it's important to elect the first woman president are stupid for wanting that. I don't. It's not stupid. Breaking the glass ceiling is important. People who attack that, I think, are very, very wrong-headed here. Also, obviously, Hillary Clinton has had decades and decades of sexist crap thrown at her. And I'm saying this as someone who is not a fan of Hillary Clinton. If you can't acknowledge the insane amount of sexist bullshit that Hillary Clinton's had to deal with over her entire career, you are living in a fantasy world, okay? So let's get that out of the way here. And again, I'm saying this entirely as someone who really doesn't like Hillary Clinton. So, okay, has Hillary Clinton supported some good and progressive legislation and policies? Of course she has. Absolutely. Yes. has she also supported some pretty awful right-wing legislation and policies? The answer is the same. Yes, she has. Absolutely, she has. So for me, when I look at the big picture of Hillary Clinton, do I see someone who I personally consider progressive? The answer to that is no, I don't. I don't. As a whole, I do not see her as a whole on progressive. That doesn't mean she has never done anything progressive at all. It doesn't mean that if she were to be elected president, that it wouldn't be a great thing to break the glass ceiling, and the symbolism of breaking the glass ceiling wouldn't be a great and progressive thing. I do believe that too. So don't put words in my mouth on this kind of thing. But I'm just looking at her her as a whole. I see her as a centrist Democrat who at times has supported some good progressive things and at other times supported some bad, devastating right-wing things. To be fair, that is also how I view our current president, Barack Obama. Some good, some bad. But again, what I'm saying is I identify as a progressive, not as a Democrat. So back to my big point again here. I alone do not get to define this, right? I don't. But let's listen to somebody else on whether Hillary Clinton is a centrist or a progressive. This is a clip from September 2015. Take a look.
You know, I get accused of being kind of moderate and center. I plead guilty.
So there, of course, was Hillary Clinton pleading guilty for being a moderate and in the center. And look, that was in September of 2015. That was not that long ago. This wasn't years ago or decades ago. This was while this presidential campaign was going on. And now she's saying that she is definitely a progressive. So look, I don't know if you want to believe September 2015 Hillary Clinton or February 2016 Hillary Clinton, but my snarkiness aside on this, okay? Let's put the snarkiness aside here. I am really interested of what you all think on the bigger picture of how we all choose to define progressivism, right? I think it's a conversation we can and should be having and continuing to have. So leave your comments below on what you think of the broader progressive movement. And again, please, let's try to do this without being dicks to each other.